What if I told you that a 100-year-old mistake is the real reason your paycheck doesn't seem to go as far as you think it should? Now, when you think of the Great Depression, you probably picture the 1929 stock market crash's single, catastrophic day that brought the world to its knees. But that crash wasn't the disease itself. It was just the fever breaking. The real disease was a tangled mess of international debt spun in the aftermath of World War I. It was a mistake that created a fragile global house of cards ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. We're going to pull back the curtain on how that century-old crisis forced a complete reinvention of the financial system we live in today, and how it secretly continues to shape your wages, your savings, and your purchasing power. This isn't just a history lesson. It's the hidden architecture of your financial life. The year is 1918. The war to end all wars is finally over. But as the guns fell silent, a new invisible war was just beginning, a financial one. The world wasn't celebrating peace. It was staring down bankruptcy. To get the picture, you have to look at the world's balance sheet, and it was a horror show. On one side, you had the victorious allies, like Britain and France. They were in debt up to their eyeballs to one country, the United States. America had bankrolled the war, lending out over $10 billion. And the U.S. government was determined to get every penny back. Washington shut down any talk of forgiving these debts. As President Calvin Coolidge famously said, "They hired the money, didn't they?" On the other side of the ledger was Germany. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles saddled Germany with crippling reparations payments, billed for 132 billion gold marks. This was a sum so huge it was clearly meant to punish, not just repay. And here's where the 100-year-old mistake locks into place, creating a toxic circular flow of money. The plan was fatally simple. Germany would pay reparations to France and Britain. France and Britain would then use that exact same money to pay back their war loans to the United States. The entire global financial system was now balanced on the shoulders of a single, defeated, and economically shattered nation. The United States insisted the Allied debts and German reparations were separate issues, but they weren't. They were links in a single, fragile chain connecting every major economy. This wasn't a stable system. It was a time bomb built on a mountain of IOUs, and the clock was ticking. So, what happens when you build the global economy on a foundation of impossible debt? It comes crashing down. The first domino to fall was Germany. Forced to make these huge payments, Germany did the only thing it could. It printed money. The result? One of the most infamous cases of hyperinflation in history. By 1923, the German mark was so worthless that people used wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. Life savings were wiped out in weeks. Obviously, Germany couldn't make its payments. This sent a shockwave across Europe. In response, American bankers came up with a clever fix: the Dawes Plan. Essentially, U.S. banks would lend money to Germany. Germany would then use those American loans to pay the Allies. The Allies would then use that same money to pay back their war debts to the American government. It was a staggering, dizzying circle of debt. This absurd cycle is what fueled the artificial boom of the Roaring '20s. Stock markets soared, and it felt like the party would never end. But it was all a mirage, propped up by American credit. Then came the trigger. October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday. The U.S. stock market crash wasn't the cause of the Great Depression. It was just the pin that popped the massive credit bubble. When the crash hit, American banks panicked. They stopped lending money overnight. The global money ground screeched to a halt. The dominoes fell fast. American loans to Germany dried up. The German economy imploded. Germany defaulted on its reparations. The Allies had no choice but to default on their war debts to the U.S. banks failed everywhere. International trade plummeted by over 50%, and millions lost their jobs. This wasn't a recession. This was the complete collapse of the international financial order. Out of the smoldering wreckage of the global economy, the world's leaders knew one thing for sure. They could never let this happen again. The crisis was so devastating that it forced a complete reinvention of our financial system. The world we live in today was forged in the fire of that failure. The architects of this new system made three fundamental changes. First, they abandoned the old god of money, the gold standard. For decades, currencies had been tied to a fixed amount of gold, but this rigidity made the depression far worse. As the crisis deepened, countries one by one cut the cord, which eventually led to the system of fiat money we use today. A dollar's value isn't backed by gold in a vault, but by the full faith and credit of the government. Second, they created a global financial safety net. In 1944, delegates from 44 nations met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They designed a new order to promote economic stability, giving birth to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. They were created specifically to prevent the kind of inescapable debt traps that had just destroyed the world. Third, the government itself stepped into the driver's seat of the economy. Before the Depression, the dominant idea was that governments should keep their hands off the market. The collapse proved that idea was a catastrophic failure. FDR's New Deal ushered in a new era of government intervention, regulating banks and giving the Federal Reserve an active mandate to promote maximum employment and manage the economy. So, a web of war debt, a global collapse, and a new world order. What does it actually have to do with you? How does a crisis from your great-grandparents' generation still reach into your wallet? The connection is direct, and it hits you in two crucial ways. First, our modern financial system is designed to be inflationary. Moving to fiat currency gave central banks, like the Federal Reserve, the power to create money out of thin air. This is seen as a vital tool to prevent another deflationary death spiral like the 1930s. But it comes at a price. The system is built to target a steady level of inflation. The Fed's official 2% target is a core feature. That means the money in your bank account is designed to lose a little bit of its purchasing power every single year. It's the price we pay for stability. Second, it completely changed the relationship between government, debt, and your job. The trauma of the Depression created the political will for social safety nets and government action. It also birthed a system far more tolerant of massive government debt. This constant dance between inflation, government spending,